Inside the last 26 minutes of the SportsMax Zone for this Tuesday, President of the Jamaica Athletics Administrative Association, the JAA's, Garth Gale, says the body has given the country's drug testing authority, JADCO, a detailed brief ahead of the National Track and Field Championship in Kingston starting on the 23rd of June. That will be Thursday. Gale was speaking earlier today in Kingston at the press conference to launch the event. The Jamaica Championships are expected to produce spectacular performances, especially in the women's sprints. Consequently, there is anxiety over whether the authorities will avoid a repeat of the embarrassing situation which denied the country's female under-20 sprint relay team a place in the history books following their world record run at the Carifta Games in April. Jamaica's Minister of Sport, Olivia Babsy-Grange, was also at the launch event. She addressed the issue of whether there will be sanctions for those responsible for the Carifta shame. But first, Garth Gale spoke about the discussions between the JAA's and JADCO.
We would have revisited several of the guidelines with JADCO, and we are assured that they will work with us as we work with them to ensuring that all the areas, all the details are covered, inclusive of starting from a world record, which is not out of our reach, to a national record, and so forth. We also work along with not only WADA, but also with the World Athletics AIU. And so they would have been in discussion with our medical team led by Dr. Carl Bruce. And so we have ensured that all of our senior athletes and also those in the testing pool have already done the mandatory 3 anti-doping tests thus far, leading into Eugene and other international events.
Well, as I had announced, that JADCO has established a disciplinary committee, and the matter is now being treated or dealt with by the disciplinary committee. I have not had any further report since on what their findings or decisions are and what the sanctions are. I await that information.
Okay, so close to 600 athletes have been confirmed to compete across 60 events for both junior and senior athletes. Leighton Levy, our in-house analyst, will be among the many media personnel covering the 4-day championship, and he joins us now. Leighton, first of all, what do you make of those comments, first of all, by the JAA's president and the Minister Grange?
Disappointed. I would have expected that by now, you know, some kind of resolution would have been found to what was an extremely embarrassing situation, and somebody or some people should have been sanctioned already. It cannot take you more than 2 weeks to investigate something that is as plain as day as what transpired at the Carifta Games in April. It boggles my mind that it takes forever for us to find resolutions to simple matters like this. I mean, I don't care what anybody tells me. You have a set of rules that were clearly flouted. And because of that, a world record that was established by the home team at the Carifta Games was not ratified by World Athletics. I don't think it can get much simpler than that. There has to be a chain of responsibility, and because of that, it should be easy to figure out who is culpable and who should be sanctioned. So that they have not even yet come up with a decision on sanctions and who is to be sanctioned, for me, is disappointing. And the only way the JAA's can guarantee or could guarantee that there won't be a repeat of what happened at the Carifta Games was to have those sanctions imposed already to ensure that whoever are the people that are going to be put in charge of the national championship starting on Thursday will know that they have to follow the rules, because if they don't, there will be a price to pay.
Yes, just to put an exclamation mark on the point that you're making, Leighton, wouldn't it be making the issue even more obvious, because Alexander Williams, who is the chairman of JADCO, on this very show, when the issue arose, put his hand up and said, we let our country down, we messed things up, and there was no defense from him. So it is very, very evident that things went woefully wrong, and there was no explaining his way out of it.
Absolutely, because they've already accepted culpability, So it's not even a matter of determining whether or not somebody was culpable. They have accepted it. Therefore, it's just about figuring out who are the people who are directly responsible for not following the instructions as laid out by the J3As prior to the start of the Caribbean Games. It's not that hard, and it should not be that hard. And for me, this is just another foot-dragging exercise that will eventually, I believe, lead to somebody, escaping the kind of sanction that is necessary in these kind of situations. We have this issue of accountability in this country that continues to hurt our own causes in terms of progressing, in terms of wanting to be first world, in wanting to follow best practices. And this is just another example of the foot dragging that continues. And it's embarrassing and it's disappointing.
Yeah, Leighton. Well, Chief Starter Ludlow Watts has also defended his team amid long-standing questions and murmurs about their competence. Watts says the issues at the start have less to do with the ability of his team and more to do with the lack of knowledge of others, including members of the media. According to Watts, his team is world-class.
4-day event, so intense 4 days. So they showed all the clippings of all things that have happened in the world, including Jamaica, including what happened in Jamaica. And the position is that the starters in Jamaica did nothing wrong. It was nothing, it's external to starters, that's number one. Number two, so it showed all the things that take place in the world. Secondly, they actually showed things that can possibly take place and how you react. Then you take us to a competition, and we actually do the competition there. An event is taking to the international, we actually work there. And we see how we treat with those competitions and how we handle it. And at the end of the day, we have a test, written test, and followed by an interview over 4 days. And it so happens that the most recent one, the two starters from Jamaica who went, that gentleman there and this gentleman here, we actually did well, and there were 5 from NACAC who were selected, and the gentleman who was speaking was one of those 5. And that gentleman there, you don't normally have 2 from a country unless you have certain things happen, because you usually win, but he did extremely well in the top 10. So I would say that in terms of the performance of the starters, the performance starters is good, we follow the rules, but sometimes people's enthusiasm sometimes do things that create problems. One of the things that we did in the last recent seminar, in the last recent practical seminar, they showed some clippings to see who false start. And in about 3 instances, only 1 or 2 persons was able to pick it up, because 0.100. So sometimes a person gets 0.098. It's hard to pick up by the naked system. But by naked eye, by naked eye. But in a situation that took place in Jamaica, there were 3 recall starters who were also fired prior to the electronic thing. So for people acting independently, and the equipment shows that, cannot be wrong.
Yeah, Ludlow Watts, their chief starter at the National Stadium in J3A's events. Leighton, the issue arose, and Watts was at pains here to defend his starters crew, because there's been a perception among fans at the National Stadium at many national championships in the past where different rules were applied to different people depending on who they were. And maybe you are not so much of an elite athlete, you get the hammer coming down hard on you, and you're an elite athlete, potential Olympic medalist, Olympic champion, and they are easy on you. So what Watts was explaining just now is that they have been performing competently, but the fans are misreading things. Your take on what he just said?
I agree with Ludwig to a point, because when you look at, for example, internationally, the Diamond League meets, the Olympic Games, World Championships, Commonwealth Games of the last window, the last cycle, you would have noticed that there have been a number of instances where athletes have, well, put it this way, there have been issues with the start. So it's not unique to us. And when I say us, I mean in Jamaica, that these things occur. My problem is like with the fiasco in 2019 with the 100-meter hurdles that was supposed to conclude the event on the final night, if you remember, that Danielle Williams was supposed to have been disqualified and eventually had to prove herself by running the qualifying time and becoming virtually the world leader to make the team back in 2019 for the World Championships, where she eventually ended up third. What we didn't get from the J3As or the starting committee, the people who are in that committee, is any clarity as to why things unfolded the way they did. Therefore, that creates speculation and that creates all kind of conspiracy theories that then will, generate a life of their own. As we know in this country, it doesn't take much for a conspiracy theory to take a life of its own and become the narrative. So what I have a problem with is not necessarily the fact that there are these glitches, because we've seen enough instances to suggest that this is not unique to Jamaica. What I find a problem with, the problem is the inability of the organizers to clarify why these decisions have been made and explain to the general public that these are the reasons why. Hence, you would then remove all doubt, or at least in certain instances, certainly remove most of the doubt as to why things unfolded the way they are. So it's more about communication and clarity as opposed to competence in mind.
Yeah, I think generally though, Leighton, there's a lot of suspicion among fans globally in whatever sport, and people tend not to trust administration. I remember when Usain Bolt started at the Daegu World Championship in 2011, there were those who felt that if he didn't rip his shirt off and show extreme disappointment at obviously false starting, the starters would have found a way not to disqualify him.
I agree, and that was a conversation that followed those World Championships in 2011 for weeks afterwards.
Yes.
That if Bolt had just kept his shirt on, he would have been fine. And that again comes down to, as you mentioned, the mistrust.
Yes.
That mistrust, however, in many instances is unfounded. The reality is, though, that because, when you have a favorite athlete or you favor a particular athlete and something bad happens to them, almost invariably, there are some fans are going to believe that there's a specific reason why their particular athlete wasn't allowed to compete. So you're not going to be able to get rid of that, because that's just fan bias. That's something that's going to be with sport as long as sport exists. However, I think in terms of communicating effectively as to why things happen the way they do, I think would go a long way into alleviating some of those situations where fans are, driving conspiracy theories that have no basis in fact.
All right, Leighton, as usual, great talking to you. The championship start on Thursday. Of course, we'll be discussing that again on Wednesday, as this is shaping up to be one of the most intense and attractive national championships we've seen in Jamaica in decades. Thanks, man.
Yeah, one more thing, Lance, before we go. There's a big argument going around about what Christopher Taylor doing the 1, 2, and the 400 meters.
Yes.
I spoke to his people today. He's only doing the 400 meters. They're not quite sure whether it was a clerical error or not. Yeah. But Christopher Taylor is only competing in the 400 meters at the national championships this weekend.
Thanks, Leighton.
No problem, guys.
Yeah. All right. George, Olivia Bamsey-Grange, the sports minister, spoke at the press conference today to address or to give an update on whatever fallout may have happened from the fiasco with JADCO and the failure to test the athletes and the subsequent non-recognition of the girls' world under-20 record. And Ludlow Watts there speaking extensively, trying to convince the fans that the starters' competence shouldn't be challenged. All this ahead of what we expect to be on the track and in the field, a real high-quality meet.
Yeah, it's going to be one for the ages. As you said, as you closed the segment, and you said that the championships are said to be special. I was saying to myself, when was the last time a Jamaica National Championships wasn't special?
That's right.
Yeah, because of the quality talent we have there. Oh, our producer says 2018. And he would know. Yeah, there you go. But more often than not, it is rather special.
Yeah.
On the point of the investigation into the JADCO shame, the disgrace, and Leighton being peeved that no decision has been taken yet coming out of the investigation. I feel his pain, and I can understand. What I would caution, though, is this. I've said on this show before that where matters like these are concerned, there is a reason why more than 90% of the times when an employee takes their employer to Jamaica's Industrial Disputes Tribunal, the employee wins 90% of the time. It's because the decisions that are taken to separate an employee from their job, the proper steps aren't followed. The procedure isn't adhered to.
Yes.
It is done without due process. Due process has no terminal date. There's nothing to say after 2 weeks you must have established due process. That's not how it works.
Yes.
And being experienced, Olivia Grange and team would have recognized that, look, if it is that we are to take an action coming out of this or take action coming out of this, it must be that the process is carried to its natural end, and only at that point do we examine it to see where sanctions should apply, if any sanctions at all.
Yes.
So I just put that on the table as a note of caution to anybody who is predisposed to being indignant about the fact that to this day there still is no word onto who will carry the can for the shame, the national disgrace of the record not being ratified.
Yeah. Careful steps to be approached to make these decisions. We go to break. When we come back, the last 8 minutes of the SportsMax Zone and our interactive segment.
Thank you for watching SportsMax on YouTube. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and to click the notification bell to stay informed.